Hey guys, Doc Pattison here, teaching pastor at Capital City, with a wrap-up of week 17 of Core52 on the theme, the Son of Man. Now this week we looked at one of Jesus' favorite titles for himself, the Son of Man. And here's the question that perhaps should bother us a little. If Jesus wanted people to know who he really was, why choose a title that sounds so ordinary? Son of Man sounds like weakness, it sounds like humanity, it sounds like nothing special. And in at least one part of the Old Testament, that is exactly what it means. In Ezekiel, the prophet is called the Son of Man, again and again, meaning just, you're human, you're frail, you're not God. So it's easy to assume that when Jesus calls himself the Son of Man, he must just be emphasizing his humanity. But that explanation does not go far enough, because there's another passage, one that completely changes the meaning. In Daniel 7, we see one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven, receiving authority and glory and an everlasting kingdom, being worshipped by all the nations. That's not just a human figure, that's a heavenly ruler. So we have a tension. Son of Man can mean weakness and humanity, or it can point to glory and divine authority. And here's the key insight. Jesus uses that tension on purpose. He chooses one title that lets him reveal and conceal his identity at the same time. Because just as Son of God doesn't always mean divinity, Israel's called God's son, kings can be called God's sons, so Son of Man doesn't automatically mean just humanity. Jesus is doing something far more strategic. Listen to how he uses it. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. The Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. The Son of Man must suffer. That's real humanity, and Jesus lived it. He was born, he grew, he got tired, hungry, thirsty, he prayed, he was tempted, he suffered, he died. He didn't just appear human, he lived a fully human life from the inside. But then Jesus says things like this. The Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. The Son of Man will come in glory and judge the nations. Now we're not just talking about humanity anymore, because Jesus also does what only God can do. He forgives sins, he gives life, he receives worship, he judges the world. So which is it? Is the Son of Man humble or exalted, weak or powerful? The answer is both. And nowhere is that clearer than at the very end at his trial. Standing before the high priest, Jesus is asked directly, "Are you the Messiah?" And Jesus answers, "You will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming on the clouds of heaven." That's not Ezekiel, that's Daniel 7. And they know exactly what he's claiming. That's why they call it blasphemy. Because in that moment, Jesus stops hinting and fully reveals what he has been implying all along. The Son of Man who suffers is also the Son of Man who reigns. And that brings us to the big idea for this week. The title, Son of Man, is the only one big enough to hold together both his humility and his glory. His path is always the same. Humility, then exaltation. Suffering, then glory. Cross, then crown. And that's what we see in Jesus. And it becomes a pattern for us, because following him means trusting that same path. We humble ourselves, and God lifts us up. We serve before we are honored. We identify with him before we're exalted with him. So don't miss this. The one who had no place to lay his head is the one who now rules the universe. And when Jesus calls himself the Son of Man, he's inviting us to see both at once, the humility and the glory, and to trust him enough to follow him in the same direction. Hope you're hanging on, guys. See you next week.